Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbalue in Lagos. It's President Buhari's 9th day in the United Kingdom. Upper Saturday, the president left the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the United Kingdom on a private visit. Well, today, he visited the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend and Right Honourable Justin Welby, at the Lambeth Palace in London. He went to the UK after attending an economic forum of the Future Investment Initiative in Riyadh. He's expected back in the country after about 3 weeks of private visits in the United Kingdom. And now to issues relating to the president and his vice. The presidency on Friday finally confirmed that some appointees attached to the office of the vice president have been asked to go. The confirmation, which is contained in a statement by presidential spokesperson, Mr. Garba Shehu, explains that there is an ongoing overhaul of the seat of government, which has resulted in several political appointments being revoked or not renewed for a second term. According to him, the exercise is on the orders of President Buhari and is aimed at cutting down multiple authorities and reducing administrative costs. He says the overhaul affects the office of the vice of the president and that of the vice president, and is therefore not targeted to undermine the vice president's office. According to him, there has been a streamlining of staff going on for a while. The president has always had fewer staff than the vice president, and there were always plans to reduce the number of staff at the villa. He goes on to say that there is no need to read any ulterior motive into the exercise as is being done in some quarters, especially speculations of a rift between the president and his vice, saying, quote, the presidency wishes to strongly deny rumors of a rift between President Muhammadu Buhari and Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. The relationship between the two leaders remains excellent and trusting. Together, they will script a glorious future for the nation, end of quote. The presidential spokesperson insists that the president is in control of his government and there is absolutely no one too powerful for the president to control. This is perhaps one of the biggest stories, political stories of the past week. Now let's get some perspective to what this means for governance, whether some of these things are standard practice or whatever we are saying. There are some undercurrent. Let's dissect these issues. I have joining me a former presidential political advisor, Mr. Akin Oshotoku, who joins us from Oxford in the United Kingdom. And here in our Lagos studio is the former vice president of the NBA, Mr. Onyekachi Ubani, and from our Abuja studio is Mr. Daniel Buwala, a lawyer also. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. Let me begin with you, Mr. Akin Oshotoku. You were in the presidency at some point when we heard and saw what transpired between the president at the time, former President Olusegun Obasanjo, your former principal, and his former vice president Atiku Abubakar. It all started like this, and a lot of people thought, oh, maybe it's just rumors, until it went boom in everybody's faces, and there was a major rift between the number one and number two citizens, which dovetailed into their second term in office. What is happening between the president and the vice president? The recent decision to cut down about 35 of the staff of the vice president in the last 3 or 4 days. Is this a standard practice? Is it something that you're familiar with? Or there is more to it?
Well, that position, I mean, the position of the situation of the president and vice president is always prone to some kind of paranoia, especially in the context of political context of Africa. It's like, well, this is your successor. If anything happens to you, you are looking at somebody who will benefit from it. So there is that inbreed, inherent, disposition towards party. But of course, but let me say this: what is happening now is not comparable with what happened when in the time of President Obasanjo. You had the vice president who was expansive, who appear to be overly well, he has political aspirations like anybody else, but it was, in his case, it was empowered and deliberately by his principal. He was thoroughly empowered. He gave a lot of latitude to him to do whatever he wants to do. What we have now is the contrary to that scenario. What we have now is somebody is a vice president who, even the little that was attributed to him now is being taken away. But in all this, what should concern us is the prioritization of power politics over governance. If you are having power politics, that seems to be the priority of this government. Governance, if you have power politics, dispute and conflict, if it doesn't affect governance, or then things are going well in Nigeria, people will be of less concern. But in a situation in which, governance is suffering and you are prioritizing power politics over governance, that is double jeopardy. So, but as I said, I'm not surprised. As a matter of fact, I feel some kind of vindication because personally I had won. I mean, I anticipated what would happen. And I did say, in the course of last election that during his first term, people were disappointed. Almost all his supporters were disappointed with him. And I said they will be doubly disappointed, were they to commit the same error of supporting him for second term. So this is, and his principal person in that regard, of course, is the vice president. But I don't know whether what should be of concern to us, especially it has become the overriding characteristics of this government, is the prioritization of power politics. Whether it is divisive, with the tendency towards divisiveness, towards hegemonia, suppression, and all kind of things, and some kind of meanness and narrow-mindedness. You saw the statement that was issued by the special advisor to the president of media, Mr. Adesina, after the verdict of the Supreme Court. Now, what is the lesson of ethics and Christianity in assuming that they won the election fairly, assuming that they truly won the election? We are taught to be magnanimous in victory, not to be mean and small-minded. I mean, he almost made it look like a crime to support Atiku. I mean, there's an inherent ambition for one-party dictatorship in his response to the Supreme Court, that there was something bad, I mean, in the situation for anybody to support Atiku. I mean, criminalizing, the supporters of Atiku, a multi-party system. But this is what we have now, that some people, they've brought the presidency to their level. I mean, there's nowhere in the world where once a president is elected, especially in a presidential system, it becomes the father, so to say, of the nation. And the example of General Gowon, you said no victor, no vanquished. That is
Chidokum, let me bring in Mr. Daniel Buala, who is perhaps very also familiar with the inner workings of the APC and, of course, what is happening in the presidency. Mr. Buala, what are your thoughts on what is happening? Is there a caving in the House? What are the undercurrent that you see? Beyond the surface, is there any meaning that you can read to this?
Well, and I'm glad that you asked the question, the undercurrent, because usually when a decision is taken or not taken, there would always be an impression, expression, or perception about the situation. My particular concern has always been, to look at my discipline as a lawyer and look at whether or not there is a violation of the law and whether or not conduct and relationship will violate the law or the smooth operation of government. I do not think there is a problem between the president and the vice president. If there was, or if there is, I'm sure the vice president would have found one way or the other to articulate it. Because if you recall, it was not long ago when somebody alleged, level allegation against him. He didn't wait for anybody to speak for him. He spoke for himself. He issued statement, and he said he was going to defend himself. If he has a problem with this decision of the president, I'm sure he would have acted. But let me tell you this, Shaun. Section 148 of the Constitution makes it clear that the president may And it added, in his discretion, confer responsibilities to the vice president or ministers of the government of the federation regarding the business of government and including the day-to-day workings of the government. In other words, there is one president who performs his function pursuant to Section 5 of the Constitution, either by himself or through the vice president or through the ministers of the government of the federation. The president, in the first term, has given, gave a lot of responsibilities to the vice president. So many parastatals and ministries and departments of government were kept under his control. Going to the second term, in his discretion, he decided some of which are supposed to return to their parent ministry. Now, look at it this way. If Shegun Okimbaloye is a special advisor or special assistant to the vice president with respect to SIP or respect to NEMA or whatever, one of these responsibilities under him, but now that department has been transferred to the parent ministry, how will Shegun Okimbaloye perform? There are two options. One, for him to go back to those ministries, or two, for him to leave the place because there is no longer vacancy, as it were. Now, if you think of him going back to the parent ministry, there are two things that are there. It means that the vice president or the president is imposing a special advisor to that DG or that MD of that department, which will not be right. Just in the same way, some of the aides of the vice president, although we are appointed by the president, but upon the request of the vice president. It is just logical. And then let us not forget that appointment is not a classroom exam where you sit, you write, you pass, and you get there. It's by privilege. And the person who appoints can equally disappoint. Now, talk of, fracas or bad blood between the president and the vice president. I have not seen any, as it were, in the public domain that is suggestive of the fact that the president has a problem with the vice president. I am also aware that even as we talk today, there are lots of other responsibilities that are supposed to be performed by the president through any of the ministers of the government of the federation that are right there under the powers and control and coordination of the vice president. So there is no problem at all downsizing people in government.
A lot of people, analysts and critics of this government have come up to say, if you look at it on the surface, you might not find anything. But if you look at the actions of what has happened in the past weeks or days, you probably will find a hole in what has happened and perhaps read meanings into what has happened. And if you look at recent history, you look at the fact that this is how it all starts and dovetailing into perhaps the change of government at some point. So if you look at some of these things, some of the responsibilities that have been taken away from the vice president, and the fact that it was even reported in some quarters that the vice president got to know on social media that the Economic Advisory Council was set up as against the economic management team that he headed. He got to know that on social media it was reported. Some of these things that are being read as political undercurrent. And in fact, some people are putting and drawing inferences of a possible contest of 2023 politics into it. Do you see that happening in the APC or within the corridors of power?
Well, let me answer the first one as to taking away certain responsibilities relating to the economy. Remember, constitutionally, the vice president coordinates the economic council. Nobody takes it away from him. And I'm not aware that the president has taken that responsibility away from him. But such other additional responsibility regarding the economy that was with him but has now been transferred to expert in the field. Remember, the vice president is a professor of law, not a professor of economics. And even though he did extremely well in his role in the first time, but you, the fourth estate of the realm, the media, and the Nigerian people have complained that the movement of the economy, so to speak, is slow. What is the problem in government strategizing and re-strategizing the government? Now, regarding 2023, I'm sure this is just the beginning. And if you say it is regarding 2023, assuming without considering that the speculation is that he's been manhandled or he's being persecuted because of 2023. I'm not aware the vice president has indicated interest to run. I know for a fact that at the party level and the way people look at it, if, for example, somebody is going to express interest to run in the Southwest, I am aware that Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is one that everybody has been talking about. So assuming it is 2023 that is being manhandled, what about Asiwaju Bola Tinubu? Is he in the government? And remember, this power can go to any part of the country in 2023. Now, the party at the level can decide to say it's going to the south or it's going to the north. But there are 6 geopolitical zones. So you have to look at it. Even your argument has to be contextualized. Are you making an argument from the perspective of north-south, pre-independent and shortly after independent? Or you're looking at the Nigerian from the geopolitical perspective? Because if you look at it from the geopolitical perspective, there are 2 regions that have legal right to cry for the presidency, the southeast and the northeast. All other regions of the country have had, at one time or the other, to produce the president. So, but it is too early to even start talking about it because, one, to talk about it, I feel like you're putting pressure on the vice president who has not indicated in the first place, and there will be such a time where everybody will be asked to indicate if he so wishes. But there is no problem with the smooth running of the government. People are trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. They started by saying he traveled without transmitting the power, and therefore he broke the law. We asked, let us look at the law and analyze. The law, he did not break the law. And if he...
I guess probably that's the point where I need to come back to Lagos, Mr. Buhari. Let me speak to the former NBA Vice President, Mr. Monday Onyekachi-Obani. Thank you so much for your patience. Let's look at the law. Is there anything wrong? Because for those who have criticized that, should or could President Buhari rule the country or govern the country by proxy, being that he's out of the country and he's still at the ends of affairs? Some people are of the opinion that he should have transmitted power to the vice president to act in his stead while he's away. Some are of the opinion that all is well. For example, he signed the amended Offshore Act from London. Do you see anything wrong in that?
Well, thank you for having me. We need to actually look at the provision of the Constitution with regards to whenever the president is away from the country, what is the provision? And I'm referring to specifically Section 145 of the 1999 Constitution. As amended, it says that anytime the president is proceeding on a vacation or he is unable to act, these are the 2 instances, he has to transmit power to his vice. Of course, he does that through the Senate President and the Speaker. When that particular declaration is made, of course, the vice now begins to act as the acting president until he comes back and transmits to the contrary. Now, we remember what happened when President Yar'Adua, the late President Yar'Adua, was in power, and he had a medical issue and he was away for many months. He didn't do what he was supposed to do, and the country was thrown into turmoil. There were crises all over the place, and people were arguing. And then they look at the Constitution, show there was a lacuna. There was no provision as to timeline within which he was supposed to do that. And so they had to now formulate what they call doctrine of necessity in order to obviate, the crisis that was actually brewing at that point in time. And so that has been the position that any time the president is going on vacation or he is unable to act, the law says he has to transmit. Now, they now have to amend that particular section and then put subsection 2, that if it does not do that, then another arm of government, and that is National Assembly, now comes in to pass a resolution. There is nowhere it is provided for in that section to say that it's only when the president is going to be away for 21 days that he has to transmit, which is what some of my colleagues, even my friend now wants to interpret it. That means that if the president is unable to act, then the country will remain in lacuna.
So it is wrong for President Buhari to have gone to the UK
yes,
without transmitting to
now, let me say it. Yeah, it's important.
Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. It is wrong for him to have done that because the section 145 says he has to, anytime he's going on vacation, and what he has called private visit. I mean, if you bring
the
it...
21 days window is not
It's
operating.
only when he fails to do that, the National Assembly comes in after 21 days. That 21 days is not for him to say, oh, it's only after 21 days. If you want to interpret it that way, that means that the president can use that if he's unable to act. Let's assume now the president is sick and is unable to act. Then he remains and leaves the country in lacuna for 21 days.
All right.
That cannot be the meaning.
That's one argument, Mr. Obani.
Yes.
Sorry, apologies. We need to take a break.
Yeah.
The argument of whether it can go without transmitted power, that's one argument. Another argument is that, is it wrong that they took the bill to him in the UK for him to sign? That's another argument that I want you to touch on. And of course, I'll get my other guests to weigh in on. Thank you so much, everyone, and welcome back to the program. Let's get back to the conversation. I have from Oxford in London, Mr. Akin Oshuntokun, a former political advisor to a former president. And also in our Abuja studio is Mr. Daniel Buwala, a lawyer. And here in the studio in Lagos is Mr. Onyekachi Ubani, a former vice president of the NBA. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on to the show tonight. Well, you were told before we went on that break, you were talking about the president, section 145 of the Constitution.
That's correct.
Whether or not President Buhari could leave for the UK without transmitting power to his vice, is expected to be in the UK for about 17 days.
17 days, yes.
But I remember my interview with Mr. Garba Shehu, he did say if he's not above 21 days, that is still within the law.
Yeah, let me read this section. It says, whenever the president is proceeding on vacation or is otherwise unable to discharge the functions of his office, he shall transmit a written declaration to the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Reps to that effect. And until he transmits to them a written declaration to the contrary, the vice president shall perform the function of the president as acting president. That is the section, we are referring to.
Subsection 1.
One. Yeah. If he's going on vacation or otherwise unable to act. These are the two reasons why he has to transmit.
So in this case, it's not like he's unable to act.
Yeah,
it's the fact that he's
going
on vacation, on private visit.
Beautiful.
Does it also include official trip?
No, official trip it does not. It's not covered. Official trip it doesn't need to hand over.
So it can act.
It can act while they're fine. But when you are going on vacation, which the issue of private visit now, private visit is talked about now entails, then he has to transmit. He has to transmit. Now, the law says...
Can he act as a president when he's on vacation?
No, he cannot. That is why the Constitution now says he has to, because he has a vice. When you are contesting an election, the Constitution allows you to go with a vice president who does whatever you are unable to do when you are not around, and that's why the Constitution allows it. But when you now go and begin to act as the president while you have a vice president there, that would be contrary to the Constitution.
So it's illegal?
Clearly illegal. Look at what the Constitution says. In the event, subsection 2, remember that we now apply what we call mischief rule. What was the purpose of putting subsection 2? Remember that subsection, the first one is not subject to subsection 2. It stands on its own. Yeah. That if you are going on vacation, if you're unable to, you must transmit. Now, in the event means if you're unable to transmit or you fail to, then the National Assembly now comes in after 21 days in order to do what you, the president, have failed to do.
So let me read the subsection 2 to our viewers so that maybe if my producer can get that on the screen so that people can see.
So in the event. Yeah, go ahead.
In the event that the president, that's subsection 2 of section 45 or 145 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. Yeah. In the event that the president is unable or fails to transmit the written declaration mentioned in subsection 1 of the section within 21 days, the National Assembly shall, by a resolution made by a simple majority of the vote of each house of the National Assembly, mandate the vice president to perform the functions of the office of the president as acting president until the president transmits a letter.
The only time allowed within which it can be in breach of that subsection 1 is only 21 days. Is in breach of it. The National Assembly now comes in. It did not
if it's over 21 days, for example, the president states more than 21 days, they now force...
automatically, the National Assembly will pass a resolution. The law says the National Assembly now comes in to do what he ordinarily supposed to have done within the time.
So if this is a contravention of the Constitution, what he has done, that he went without transmitting.
Without transmitting.
Now,
if they are now using that 21 days to mean if he has to spend more than 21 days, that is not intention. Because I'm talking about mischief rule. What was the reason of putting the timeline? It was of what happened in the time of President Yar'Adua, who was away for an indefinite time, and there was no timeline. But this was saying, look, if you are going on vacation, if you are unable to act, you must transmit. That is what the law says. That subsection 1 is not subject to subsection 2. Subsection 2 is standing on itself, saying if this man now does not do all what he's supposed to do, then after 21 days, the National Assembly
now force Vice President to act.
Are you following me? So it does not mean that you have to now say you have to wait for 21 days. Let's assume that the president is unable to act. Let's even assume. I'm asking my colleague now. Can you allow a country to remain in a vacuum for 21 days? Waiting for 21 days to elapse before you can now transmit. So now, that would be
that's one argument, Mr. Albani.
Yes.
The other argument is whether they can take, because we understand that the chief of staff, that whom we saw in a picture with the president, when the president was assenting to the amended bill of the offshore. So he took that bill to the president to assent, to give the presidential assent. So is that permissible under the law too?
No. Now, since he has failed to do what he's supposed to do, that's why they're now taking the law to him. You know, in the understanding that he's still acting as the president while on vacation. The president is on vacation. The Constitution recognizes only vacation, or is unable to, or when it's official duty. There is nothing like private visit in our Constitution. The president is clearly on vacation. So taking the law for him to sign while he's on vacation is clearly illegal. And he does not even speak well of us. You know, my argument is that why the rush? If the president is on vacation and that is a law passed, why don't you come to the country and probably sign this bill in Aso Rock and not in London? Even if he signed
is it morality or law now?
Including law. You know, for the fact that he has failed to transmit, he is still performing an official duty as a president while on vacation.
All right. I mean, because I know Mr. Buhari,
you know, he hold a contract.
He's dissenting on that.
Yeah, what I'm saying in effect is that because of the fact that he has failed to do what he's supposed to do, he is still acting as a president even while he is on vacation. There is no official, private visit under our Constitution. The president, simpliciter, is on leave. And he's supposed not to act.
But there's nowhere in the law that is cast that if the president is in a private capacity, cannot perform executive or official duties. Is there any?
There's no provision like that.
So he's also permitted to, in fact, if it is within the country, for example, if the president is in Nigeria and is
not on vacation, and is not unable to act.
Can he do official duties?
He can sign. Yes, he can do official duties.
But you have a problem with
he's now on leave.
Okay.
If he's on leave, the law says if he's on vacation, he has to transmit.
Let me allow Mr. Buhari to, because you obviously were on different line of argument on this matter. What are your views on this? He has said on two grounds, the president, there's been an illegality in some of the things that have happened. What are your views on that?
Well, my learned senior will have to take a position, whether he has breached or he has not breached. And if he has breached, then the National Assembly must act. And the Constitution says 21 days. Now, let me tell you this. The Supreme Court held that where the wordings of a statute is clear and unambiguous, it does not give room for any meanings to be given. The wordings of Section 145 is clear. First of all, the wordings in the past used to be whenever the president transmits to the president of the Senate and speaker, whenever he transmits. So it left the discretion with the president whenever he likes to transmit, home or away. Now, when Yar'Adua was taken abroad, he was unconscious. So he fell on the first limb where it says unable. But there is the second limb where it says fails. So when they corrected that, they now provided, instead of whenever the president transmits, he said whenever he will travel, he shall transmit. The second one is just the way the wordings of law and statute is. First, it gives you obligation. And two, it tells you the penalty for disobeying what you are obligated to do. So the obligation is in Section 145, sub 1, that when he is traveling on vacation or he is unable to perform the function of his office, he shall transmit. Subsection 2 is the penalty in case there is no fulfillment of subsection 1. It says, we are the president. It says, in fact, in the event. What is in the event? It's talking about what happened or what is going to happen. In the event that the president, number one, is unable to, and number two, or fails. Unable to gives a situation where the president is sick or incapacitated. Fails to contemplate the political realities or contemplation based on politics, that he may choose not to do it. Now, but the wordings of the Constitution is clear. In the event that is unable to or fails to, the National Assembly within 21 days, if he does not do that, will then mandate the vice president to act. In other words, that the president has a right.
Let me quickly put it to you, because we are not in a courtroom, so we might not have the opportunity to argue and in that sense. So, based on subsection 1 of section 145, has there been a breach?
No breach whatsoever. No breach at all.
No, but you just said it that because subsection 2 says in the event of subsection 1, so that if he failed or is unable to. Now, in this event, the president hasn't. So the question is that he has said that the president is obviously in breach of subsection 1 of section 145. In your own view, as the president has traveled on vacation, can president travel without transmitting power? Is that a breach or not based on subsection 1?
Based on subsection 1, he has not breached. But if he stays abroad beyond 21 days, then he has breached. And that is only when the National Assembly can act. But before 21 days, they cannot act.
So let me, the other side is whether or not, either the morality or the legality of the president, the bill being taken to the president in his private capacity to authorize or to assent to a bill in the United Kingdom. Is it moral, or is it morally wrong, or is it illegal?
Both morally and legally, he has not breached, because the president can in fact sign it in Antarctica or over the Atlantic. The Constitution or any extant law does not stipulate a ceremony or a specific location where the president can sign. The most important thing, as contemplated by law, is that when a bill is sent to the president, he has a period within which he can assent to. He assent to it by signing. As long as you cannot plead non est factum, that is to say he is not the one that signed it, then the signing is regular. And if you want to prove non est factum or the absence of non est factum, the law does not stipulate a ceremony where certain people are supposed to view it to then authenticate whether or not he has signed it. So in other words, he can sign it in the sea, he can sign it on the mountain, he can sign it in Antarctica, and he can sign it in any country of the world.
Mr. Abani, you seem to be nodding your head in the negative.
No, of course, I don't agree with him. I don't agree. In the first place, as I said earlier, if the president is on vacation, he ought not to sign any bill whatsoever. The person that's supposed to sign that bill is the acting president, who he has transmitted power to. That is what he's supposed to have done in the first place. I want to ask him, let's assume that the president is unable to act as the president of Federal Republic of Nigeria. Do we have to wait for 21 days before he transmits power? Ask him that question. Do you have to leave a country in a vacuum? Let's even assume, because the law says he has to transmit.
There's no vacuum. The vice president is on the ground.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm saying if he fails to transmit to that vice president to now act as the acting president, is it the right thing for the president now to wait until 21 days if he's unable? Let's assume that the president falls sick and is in the country and is not able to go to office and act as a president. Do we have to wait for 21 days? Because that would be the absurdity in reading 21 days in everything that we are talking about, the president unable to act as a president. He has to transmit power if he's going on vacation or if he's unable to. That is what subsection 1 says. That subsection 1 is not subject to subsection 2. It's only when he now fails to, then another arm of government will do what the president is supposed to have done by now passing a resolution empowering the vice president to act as an acting president.
Maybe we need the Supreme Court to clarify
I think
this.
So. I think so.
I think you lawyers have a lot of work to do to clarify this.
And I know the court will set, because they will look at the reason for enacting subsection 2. And that is why my learned colleague is trying to miss it by saying this man can sign, anywhere, even when he's on vacation. He's supposed to have transmitted in the first
because
place.
that section also
Say
applies to governors also.
Well, exactly, to the
executive.
governor and deputy governors.
Let me bring in someone who has worked in the villa before, Mr. Akin Oshotokun, because I want us to also move to some issues relating to Showore, the rule of law, and the present government and the handling. Mr. Akin Oshotokun, give us your view on the politics of 2023 that a lot of people have drawn into what is happening or what is perceived to be happening in the presidency between President Muhammadu Buhari and Vice President Osinbajo. A lot of people say, look, nothing is happening. But from what you know or what you have seen or what you have experienced in the past, give us your experience on what is happening. 2023 politics playing out?
Well, if it is playing out, that will be very tragic. I mean, we're in 2019, for God's sake. I mean, Nigeria, in terms of what it needs, in terms of its governance, what it needs in terms of governance, Nigeria is almost an emergency case. I mean, you have so many. Things just get distorted anyhow in Nigeria. Now the Supreme Court just gave a judgment, affirming the presidential, and we're talking about 2023. And the reason we are talking about it is because the issue is generated from the seat of power, from those who shouldn't. Again, look, we all know the meaning of vacation. Now we are making heavy weather of what a vacation is. So when you are on vacation, do you come back to the office to come and present politics today? Look, these are the ridiculous things that are going. Now we have a crisis of confidence. And look, don't forget that it's what is missing or what people are not taking is that, look, the vice president's office, right, was trying to refute or deny the reality, issued a statement that to the effect that what people were saying was not correct. And then his counterpart, in the presidency, immediately the same day issued a counter statement to what has happened. So all these things, all these academic discussions about whether it transmits, that the problem is deeper than that. And you have seen the dramatization of the problem, in what happened between the office of the vice president and the president. I mean, look, if the president, he said he was going on vacation for 2 weeks. What is so, if you're on vacation in the first place, that means I don't know what the meaning of vacation is. But apart from that, just 2 weeks, if you cannot trust your vice president, if you cannot entrust him with a position on which is constitutionally empowered to do for 2 weeks, then something that is not the kind of presidency that will take Nigeria to anywhere. I mean, look, that is the heart of the crisis of confidence. Forget about all these legalities and things like that. If you have a vice president that you were elected on the same, and forget about vacation on what the Constitution says. You cannot delegate authority to him to act for 2 weeks. You know the implication of that? So this is the problem we have in this country. As I said, look, I will hope if other things were equal, if we are not in such a terrible state, in almost as all spheres of life, politically, economically, you can say maybe you cannot even afford this kind of crisis. Now, in a situation in which the country is, this country is almost on a life support. And then you are having this unnecessary, crisis or whatever being generated.
All right, Mr. Oshotokun, just for a moment, we need to move into another realm, and that is on the issue of the rule of law. Omoyele Sowore is still in the DSS custody, and that is days after the court says he could go home on bail with conditions, though. The Department of State Services is yet to release Mr. Sowore despite meeting his bail conditions. That's according to a member of Mr. Showore's legal team, Barrister Marshal Abubakar, who led a team of family members to the headquarters of the DSS to receive Mr. Sowore. Mr. Abubakar said after putting calls across to some high-ranking DSS officials, they were told to wait as the persons who could authorize Mr. Showore's release were unavailable. Well, the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Mr. Tony Ojukwu, has asked law enforcement agents to stop desecrating the judiciary. His comments are in reaction to the alleged refusal of the officials of the Department of State Services to release the social campaigner Omoyele Sowore